welcome to another episode of People Who Inspire. So this is season 3. Yes, season 3 of People Who Inspire. I'm excited to come your way with this season, and you should expect a lot more inspiration from my guests. And I'm particularly excited for today because of the guest that I have. We're going to talk about passion for impact, what it means to go beyond what you do to trying to affect your generation, your community, and affecting the people around you. My guest today is someone that I admire and who is doing quite amazing work all over the world. I'm going to bring to you now on the screen my guest. And so I'm excited. Hello, Afia.
How are you,
Afia?
I am good. Fine. Thank you for having me on your show. I consider it a privilege to be here. So thank you.
I'm excited. Really, truly, thank you also for, I know you're a busy person, for kind of making time to come to the show. And I hope that you kind of would share a bit of your life with us, so that my viewers can draw some inspiration also from not just what you do, but who you are as a person.
Absolutely.
Awesome. And today, I'm going to make sure that if you have any questions as well, please feel free to send them through. If you have any comments to share with us regarding the topic we're talking about, or if there's any questions you have for Afia, just feel free to send them through. So we're going to just start a conversation. As usual, I'd like to start with, getting to know who Afia is. I know for sure, and we're going to talk about that. I know for sure that you wear so many hats, So in some circles, you are like this wild coder, programmer, data analytics, mathematician, whatever. And in some circles, you are this musician who is churning out albums, and in some circles, you're an entrepreneur, right? So can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, right? Like who are you as a person? Tell us where you grew up. I know Ato was an Afia. My friend said you went to school together. So tell us, where you grew up, how you grew up, up until this point.
Okay. Shout outs to Ato. So Ato actually helped me find Coursera, which is an app that helps you get the Ghanaian language alphabet. And that was key to my Chi music album. So shout out, Zato. I wanted to say that. So thank you for the question. I am the only child of my mother. I call her Mama, and I'm the firstborn of my dad's children. I call him Dad. I was born in Kumasi. I grew up, in my infancy in Swami, Bullcrome Estate. And when I was in class 3, going to class 4, we moved to the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology campus because my mother's elder sister is married to a man called Mr. Amwamensa, who worked for the Building and Road Research Institute, which kind of has a partnership with the university. So their employees also stay on the campus. So my mom and I moved in to live with them from class 3 going to class 4. And my mother has a very persevering spirit. She actually stood on the woman who was pestering the judge in the Bible to actually get me admission, because I wasn't qualified to go to that school because I wasn't a lecturer's kid. But for about half of the school term, my mom would dress me and we will pass by the principal's office and we kept wearing him out. I'll be dressed in very nice clothes. I'll be on good behavior, and we kind of wore him out. And so he put me in class 4D, which had one of the best teachers called Mrs. Safo back in the day. People were clamoring to have their kids in her class. And that's how I got my start at USD primary school. And so I would stay there through junior secondary school and sit for BECE. And I was fortunate that my heart desire was answered when I gained admission into Wesley Girls. Before going to secondary school, I was moved to live with my dad because my mom began desiring to relocate to the United States. And so that was quite a bit of transition, going from an only child to becoming the firstborn in a household. While growing up, my dad visited me occasionally. I would say he painted a picture of a very successful man to me right from infancy, because he will dress to kill. He loves cars and will come in, one of the nicest cars. He will take me to popular restaurants like Joe Fell. I hope I'm saying it right, but there's a popular restaurant near
Yes,
his.
I know Joe Fell.
Yeah, we used to go there a lot, and he will put me on the spot to defend my report cards. And I knew from very early on that my dad does not like bad grades. So I really worked hard, primarily because of the love I had for my mom, to make sure that her only child was doing well, but it was also to really impress my dad when he would visit on those occasions. So I moved to Accra to live with my dad and stepmom, half siblings, and a stepsister. And navigating that wasn't too easy in the beginning. And then from Wesley Girls, I enrolled in the mathematical sciences program at the University of Ghana, where I read computer science, mathematics, and physics. And then I heard about statistics, and I decided I didn't like going to the labs after lectures to practice physics. And so I decided I would take a different subject, statistics. I didn't realize it was also going to be very demanding, even though there were no labs. And so here I was in level 200 pursuing computer science, statistics, and mathematics. And so from there, I'll become a teaching assistant at the Department of Statistics. And then I will work with an HR consultancy firm with this woman who's the seasoned HR specialist in Ghana, has gone to have an amazing career at even Access Bank, KPMG, and stuff like that. So it was a great time learning from her. And she just happens to also be my mom's first cousin. And so she's my auntie. And so after I moved to the US to be with my mom, and then, decided I had to go back to grad school, I first worked as an intern at a church. I worked at a hotel, working the graveyard shift as a night audit. And then it hit me that I have to go back to school. And so I enrolled in a dual master's program in statistical science and operations research. And I became the first woman actually to pursue them at my university, which is George Mason University.
Wow.
I didn't realize when I was doing that. I just knew that I happened to be the only woman navigating between both classes, but I just did not realize in the history of the program, I was the first woman doing it. So about 8 years later was when I found out. And I remember looking back and say, all the marketing I could have done to open doors for me, and you all did not even mention that.
Yes, exactly. Like the personal branding.
To me. So anyway, Dr. Lowich of blessed memory was the one who told me that you were our first girl. So from George Mason, I interned twice, one with an orthopedic center and also with an insurance company called Progressive Corporation, all the way in Ohio. And when I wrapped up my dual degrees, I found myself working at a think tank called Mathematical Policy Research. I was hired as a senior program analyst 1, and I'll get promoted to 2 before I will leave. Whilst there, I ran national reports for the National Science Foundation, where the think tank was contracting with them. It was a big deal, and it taught me a lot about leadership, because my first supervisor, Maria, and I've written an article even about her on LinkedIn, really taught me a lot about what will launch my leadership career, because sometimes you have the qualities within you, but you need a physical model of how that functions for you to be able to really rise to the occasion. So she saw potential within me and put me on these high profile reports, and I ran them. It led to my promotion. And around the time was when I found Women Who Code-Accra, then Coders Who Travel, and then continued on to work with Deloitte & Touche and also Deloitte Consulting as a rehire. So I'll leave that at that for the introduction, because I'm sure you have a lot of questions to ask me today. And so I want to give you enough margin.
Wow, that's really amazing. And you know, when we started, you mentioned Kasahoro. I never knew like you're part of the Kasahoro group, like because I use the app like for the tree and Ghanaian language.
No, let me clarify. I'm not part of the group. I'm a consumer. Okay. So what I meant was when I was doing the Chi album, I needed to translate the English lyrics. And I didn't want to use, you know how people use 3 for air and C for all. I really didn't want to do that. So I went on Facebook, and I think I've seen posts about Ato, or I thought Ato would know for some reason. So I reached out to him and said, you know, I'm looking for an app that does that. And he brought Kasahoro up. And so I went and downloaded it on my laptop so I could have those air and all vowels in the
Okay, now it's clear to me.
Shout out to Kasahoro, but you know, I've enjoyed the app so far.
Yes, it's really amazing. And when I look at your life's journey, you know, as you just shared with us, I see, let's say, two distinct, you know, like features that maybe I would like to ask you about. The first thing is like, who was your inspiration growing up, right? So I know, like you said, you know, you at some point had to kind of move around a little bit. And I know that in all these circumstances, you were driven by someone. Did you have like a role model growing up? Was it your dad, your mom? Was it your aunt? Like what was it like, you know, if you had any role models, you know, to begin with?
Yeah, so it's a great question, but looking back, I'll say there wasn't a singular role model, but I was surrounded with a lot of love from my mom, my grandmother, my uncle, one who is an ordained minister at Assemblies of God Church. We attended the startup charismatic church. My mom wanted to make sure she was there for her brother, so we went at least 4 times a week. And there were a lot of people in that church that loved on me, you know, like Uncle Yusuf, who is the Sunday school teacher. There was this woman who was at the women's ministry who used to joke that I was their leader because I was always there, you know. And then there was this widow. There was this widow who lived upstairs who actually gave her dining hall to be the space where the church will be founded from. And she also loved on me. Like when I got tired during church programs, I could always climb upstairs to her and she will care for me and I'll play with her 2 children, you know. So all over there were just people, whether it was my dad who visited occasionally to bring that, you know, maybe highlight to an occasion. It was just different people. I can even recall neighbors that, you know, we lived at number 18 Ridge Road on UST campus, and there were people in number 17, number 15, the guest house. There were parents there who, it was just a community-based affair of just caring for children, just really driven by a lot of love. And so, you know, church was an inspiration. My mom was an inspiration. Making sure that I could put a smile on her face was a priority for me for even as far back as my memory recollects, you know. So not a singular person that would say I was always looking up to. But even as I'm saying that, I remember I was good at picture making, like drawing still objects and painting and stuff. And there was a College of Arts student, Bra Kwabena, who lived on at the number 17. And I was always trying to mimic his works. And so you go through that for about 2-3 years and you work with your peers and it's like, oh, wow, you're really killing this field. So it's not just one singular person, but it was a whole community. You know, it reminds me of the saying of it takes a village to raise a child. It was a lot of that growing up.
Yeah, that's very profound, because I always think, like, these days a lot of us are building like individual homes that have walls around them, and so let's say the children that are being brought up these days are only affected by the nuclear family that they're raised by. But I remember I grew up in a compound house. You know, like, your neighbor was essentially like an extension, you know, of the nuclear family of your mom and your dad, you know. So there was this whole community-based living, right? Because you're sharing like bathroom, you're sharing compounds with other people. And so you're mindful of the needs and wants of others. And I feel that these days we are kind of breeding like a group of, let's say, youth who are very egocentric, because that's how they grew up. Like, you can't blame them. Like, they grew up just in their homes that have walls and dogs. No one can come in or get out, you know. And so it's quite interesting that you mentioned that, you know, like a whole community. And this is so critical. Like myself, I had such influences growing up. I remember the first book I ever fell in love with was called The Trial and Death of Socrates, by a neighbor who was at Legon at the time. I was in primary school. He got me that book. Like, I saw him reading it and I wanted to read it as well, you know, and he gave it to me, and that kind of sparked my interest in reading. So it's interesting that you mentioned that.
Yeah, so beyond just the love, it's like my mom never restricted me growing up, that because I was a girl, I couldn't play with, I had a lot of male cousins, 4 with my auntie and, you know, other cousins across my uncles and other aunties. And she never restricted me that if they were going to play soccer, I couldn't play. So I actually played soccer, and I was fairly known for it in the community. Most people might not remember much for me, but they remember that I used to play soccer. I used to play video games, Nintendo and PlayStation with my cousins. Their dad invested in that. We used to play a lot of table tennis, you know, against, you know, neighbors. And it was like competition. It was like no joke. Like, if you mess you around, you are going to sit a while, you know. So you had to, you know, bring your A game to it. We play, you know, a game called Stay, and so you never find me playing girl games like hand skipping games like Ampe or dressing up. You know, for me, it was more going with the vim and the flow with the guys. And I wasn't held back, you know, I wasn't held back for so long. And just when, you know, well-meaning neighbors, especially the women, thought I had hit puberty and that my mom should start reining me in, that was just about the time that my move to my dad happened. Now, Accra was very different, because in Accra, it has that vibe, especially if you come from Kumasi. At that time, at least in the place we were living in, Adenta, it didn't really have that same community vibe. So you were kind of left to whatever action was happening in your house. And as my dad kept rising the ladder in his career, we even will have a walled house, you know, and I can tell the difference in my emotions as a child, going through that community-based, open, you know, allowing you to be yourself versus just mostly being at home and not having that enough interaction with your fellow community members. And I think, you know, the debate is very, you know, thriving with, you know, how these days the kind of makeups that children have will potentially affect their mental health as they grow up. Because, you know, in my childhood, there was no time to think about and, you know, connect with your emotions, because you were always doing and, you know, playing or doing something, and you would just be worn out after all those play and just sleep when you get the least chance to and begin the next day and so on and so on. But when you have an alone time with yourself more and more, not that it's not great, but it's great for self-reflection. But if it just keeps going on and on and on, you get to be in tune with certain emotions that probably you wouldn't have time engaging in a different kind of setting.
Yeah, that's so true. And clearly I can tell that you're a woman of many gifts and talents, because you mentioned that you're doing sports, you are also good with like artwork, Now what I'm curious about is why mathematics? Like the average Ghanaian is running away from these, like that's mathematics, physics, like you're mentioning it, and I was like, what? These are courses that like we run away from, like growing up, like we don't even think about it because they're so hard and difficult. And here you are with all the other talents and gifts you had, you still decided to do this. Like what was the reason behind that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that allows me to contemplate on why I would have gone that route. So my mom allowing me to be myself was all great until, like I said, I hit puberty when people started feeling her years that I could become pregnant, which most likely is the concern for a lot of homes once a girl hits puberty. But sometimes that fear of maybe you can potentially get pregnant can also let you hold your daughter back, that, the sports that I was allowed to play, people were suddenly maybe saying, was she supposed to be playing with it? Guys like that. And I started being like sort of being asked to tone down things. And I suppose I was drawn to math, and it wasn't just math, chemistry, and also science, analytical things, because I think maybe the men dominated those fields, and also maybe more and more girls shied away from it. And maybe it felt like sports, playing soccer with the guys and holding my own. And so I didn't really feel phased that I couldn't do it, So maybe that's where it came from, that, hey, I know I can, kick a soccer ball just as good as you can. And so if you can do math, why cannot I not do math? So maybe perhaps that's what was generating, but it continued to shine. My math grades over all other subjects, and even in senior high school. But eventually what got me to enroll in mathematical sciences though is, it's a silver lining, because really growing up, we all were sort of made to think that certain subjects like being a medical doctor was the ish thing to do, right? And there was that much pressure, even from my mother and her side of the family, because at that time they felt that I had the grades, especially in junior high school, to become that. However, what they didn't realize, and I think maybe what my dad realized, was that my grades in math were better than biology in senior high school. And because my dad did financial services, I guess he was sort of also hoping that someday I could support him. And so he was not looking. It's interesting to say that my dad is one of the few men in those days who were okay with their daughters not becoming a medical doctor and ending up in financial services. And so I was living with him at that time. And my dad does have a strong personality, very confident. And so when he makes up his mind that this is the way we are going, it's like a train. If you stand in front of it,
you just kick it out.
You'll be run over. So I didn't have a choice. I was living with him, and he said mathematical sciences, because he's a graduate of Legon, University of Ghana himself too. And so he also preferred that I would go to Legon. So it was a lot of choices that was strongly guided by my dad that I should do mathematical sciences. And so I remember when I enrolled in mathematical sciences, about a month in, I think he was having some doubts that maybe he had pushed me too hard into the program. And so we met at one of the lodges or restaurants on campus, and he was like, some of my friends are lecturers, so it's not too late if you want to go your mother's route of biological sciences. But at that time, I'd fallen in love with the classes that I was taking, and I was able to share with him that I think I'm fine, for now. So we did have that kind of reflective conversation. And so for me, that's how I ended up in math. It was having the grades and having that strong guidance from my dad that this is it for you instead of what is popular at that time.
Wow, that's interesting. And I think it goes also a long way to buttress the point that parents have a lot of influence over, let's say, not just the career path, but the major decisions that they make, that affects them for the rest of their lives. And I think when I look at your profile, I mean, the fact that you're doing math, you're doing physics, I was like, this is like very unconventional. so that's what prompted that.
Well, I abandoned physics in first year, so let's not claim that. But yeah. I can own up to statistics and computer science because I did double major in that for my bachelor's at the University of Ghana. And yes, I did math for 2 years at the university, but I sort of swapped maths and physics with statistics because I got to like statistics more. I wrestled with the theoretical concepts, but with the applied concepts, I was just so great with them that I knew that I could, sort of mitigate the impact of my understanding in theoretical by getting very strong grades in the applied, to still get my degree. So that's why I chose statistics. And then at the time too, you couldn't really do single major computer science because the department was understaffed and also under-resourced. And so practically everybody in my year group had to do double major degrees, either with computer science, math, computer science statistics, computer science economics, computer science geography, whatever the pairing was, psychology. But we all came together as a big class for computer science, classes.
Yeah. And I look at the fact that you, like you said, did graduate school outside, and I know you did your undergrad and all your foundational studies in Ghana. Like, what to you was the major, let's say, cultural shock as far as the educational differences is concerned, like between Ghana, what you had at, let's say, Legon or and then the graduate school you had in the United States? Like, what was the major difference to you?
Yeah, the major difference for me is that in Ghana, there was a lot of emphasis on memorization and your ability to recollect what I called humongous formulas, like maybe what a normal distribution is, you have to memorize the formula before you can start applying. And then in the US, your lecturer will actually say, make a cheat sheet and put those formulas on a paper so that the focus is not one bit on your ability to recollect that formula, but in how you apply the concepts you've been taught, right? So that was, for me, I remember I also became a graduate teaching assistant at the Department of Statistics at George Mason during my graduate school PSU. And thank you for saying that. And during that time, there were other TAs, GTAs, also pursuing the program alongside myself. And there was this one lady called Petra. She would always come to me, Afia, in her American accent, are you done with the assignment? And have you begun the assignment? I'll say yes. Usually they'll give the assignment, let's say Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, I'm already on it. And I'll ask her the same question. She said, like, no, I have plenty of time. So maybe a day before, that's when you see her aggressively trying to finish her work, and we'll put in the same work. And sometimes you want to rationalize that is she really doing the work or what?
Mm-hmm.
But there were a few times when she won't make it to the class and she would say, pick up my paper. And I noticed that she was doing very, very well, just like I was doing.
Oh.
So I knew there was something wrong with me getting started a whole week before and somebody starting a day before and still getting the same results. When I compared my paper to hers, I noticed that I'm spending time deriving words in math and stats they call first principles, the idea that before you quote any formula, you have to derive it. That was what I was taught in Legon in the US. It's already been derived. Why are we re-deriving it?
Why deriving?
Every time we are applying. So instead, there are calculators called TI-80 series calculators that are able to do all these complex computations for you. And so Petra was combining those TI-80 calculators with not deriving formulas from first principles. And so that was shortening her path. So I had to learn how to use the TI calculator. Calculators in my time were actually banned from the exams hall and from, doing your work. And so it's that emphasis of the theoretical versus the so what of what you've learned.
Okay.
That was the biggest shock, because once we start getting into, now that I've taught you all of this, how can you be bold and confident to take those tools and launch your own selves forward to solve the problem? And that was the culture shock for me in the US education.
This so profound, because I schooled in Ghana, so I have not had the kind of exposure that you've had as far as the educational system is concerned. But I hear this all the time, repeatedly, from people who have schooled abroad, that the emphasis is on, let's say, the application of their theoretical understanding, and we are kind of still regurgitating the theoretical formula, first principle, almighty formula, what have you. It's it gets me thinking, really, maybe that explains why we are behind.
It's one of the key drivers, because for someone who grew up on the University of campus, when my mom and I will walk, and we walked a lot because she didn't have a car, and if we didn't have lift rides from someone who had compassion on us, we walk. And so when you're walking by the USD campus, it was USD back in the day, not KNUSD. When you're walking by USD, you'll see all these mini signboards with names and credentials all through the houses, whether it's Dr. and Mrs., Professor and Mrs. There were even households that were Dr. and Dr. Mrs. Back as far as I can remember. So it's not the academics that, we haven't figured out as a society back in Ghana and Africa at large. I really don't think that's what it is, because if you look back, that this is my childhood that I'm talking about, and I was seeing those signboards, and I'll ask my mom what they meant. My mom was a teacher in Ghana, and she would explain to me. And it also influenced because I took it for granted that one day I will be on a university campus. And I realize now that it's a blessing to have had that environment to shape your horizons at a very early age. But the question remains that as long as we pursue the observation remains, as long as it's all about, maybe the titles and the accolades, but we don't zero or hone in into the application of those degrees in our society, then we still have a long way to go as a country and a continent.
Yeah, that's true. And when I look at, let's say your journey, you finished graduate school. You as you mentioned, you did some internships and all that. What I'm particularly interested in is the entrepreneurship journey. So can you walk us through the timeline of the coders who travel and women who code Accra? like at what point did you see the need to start these organizations, and what is the mission for these organizations that you've started?
Sure. So I found entrepreneurship by observing my mom. My mom had a little shop that operated when she was off work back on UST campus with provision store. And then my uncle also founded a church that my mom also helped support. So maybe I picked one or two things from them. And then my father also, although had a career in corporate world, but he also eventually became a CEO of a financial services company. So maybe there is something to be said about watching people around you do that. And that my auntie that I spoke about at the beginning also had that HR consultancy firm. But for me, Women Who Code, the journey to Women Who Code, or creating the first West African chapter for Women Who Code, which is Women Who Code-Accra, began in August 2014. I was a senior programmer analyst at Mathematical Policy Research, a think tank in Washington, D.C., and a colleague just invited me that there was going to be a data science Washington, D.C. event, and would I like to go? And so I said, yes, I'd like to go. And then in order to RSVP for the event, I had to download an app called Meetup, which is very popular now, but it wasn't back then. And it said I needed that before I could register for the event. And so I downloaded it on my app, and then I went to that event. It was a great event, and I came back. And the Meetup app recommended that there's another organization called Women Who Code. Would I like to join? And I was like, oh, I've not heard about Women Who Code, but I'm a woman, I'm a programmer. I guess I'm going to check them out. So I went out to a library, Martin Luther King Jr. Library in Washington, D.C., and saw a group of women gathered around each other, teaching themselves. I believe that day it was Java. And as I walked in and left, I just had this strong emotion that I wish I had had a similar environment while learning, mathematical sciences. I just wondered what could have happened if all the female students would have banded together like these women had banded and bonded and, teaching each other how to program. So that idea was planted, and every now and then the idea will come back to me. Every now and then it will come back to me again. And so by the third or fourth month, I was tired with the idea just kept coming back. And I reached out to their contact address on their website, and their chief of staff at the time, Neil, responded and said, oh, no, we don't have a chapter in Ghana. And she gave me a link to look at the locations, and there was only one in Africa. I believe it was in Tanzania at the time. And so I looked at the whole map, and I saw how the organization was opening up in different cities, and it was like the African map was very blank. And so that informed my decision that I would like to launch a branch or a chapter, but a Women Who Code. It's called Network, a network of women who code in Ghana. And so that journey took me to contacting my immediate classmates, but they were in different seasons, women classmates in different seasons. Most of them had gotten married, had children, they had higher positions even in their careers than I had in the US, because they didn't relocate. They stayed in Ghana and just kept advancing their careers. And so they just couldn't support the mission. But I spoke with a childhood friend, and he introduced me to 3 younger women, like maybe 3 years younger, who are in the computer science space. And one of them, called Judith, and I really bonded. And it felt like Judith was like a mini me, because she went to Wesley Girls, she went to Legon, she also pursued computer science and statistics, and she was doing her national services. And I remember during my national services missing a job as Standard Chartered for a data analyst role, because I frankly didn't have a lot of preparation help. I didn't understand how to go for and get a corporate interview or a corporate job. And so I remembered my need for guidance at that stage, and I could see that in Judith, that she was looking for support and guidance. And so I helped revamp her resume, introduce her to some contacts, and I began teaching her and another lady SaaS programming over the internet. But it was rifled with so many challenges because it was start and stop at the end. And, and so when I got to know Judith better, and I also reconnected with another lady called Asabia. Asabia was working at Dream Oval, and so she knew a lot of about 4 ladies who were interested in being part of Women Who Code. And so in November 2015, I flew from the United States, and together with those women, I spearheaded 7 maiden events, a hackathon, lightning talk, my favorite programming language, Excel in Your Career workshop, a seminar on the case for programming, other 3 more events for that 7 events. And it was a lot of work because I had to balance working at my corporate job, taking far-flung status so that they can continue to pay me part-time. And then I had to finance the whole project because I wasn't fortunate to get any in-country sponsors in Ghana. Women Who Code takes it for granted that because they are Women Who Code, everybody is on that campaign, right? But that happens in advanced countries like San Francisco, Vancouver.
Yeah.
People give budgets for those kind of missions. But in Ghana, people are not doing that. And so shout outs to Impact Hub Accra, University of Ghana Computer Science, ICT, leaders who gave us space to even begin the first, 6 months kind of programming of events. When I came back after launching Women Who Code-Accra, I shared my experiences with the headquarters and the leadership. And they said, oh, we actually don't pay for those kind of expenses because sponsors in the country are supposed to foot that bill. That was quite a shock because I financed it and I thought my pictures and videos will convince these people that I've done the work, and that I should be recuperated for my expenses. That wasn't the case, but it launched me on a journey to going to see a lawyer to understand my options. He happened to be Jewish, and he was like, you can start your own organization, and that conversation planted the idea of Coders Who Travel. And he also helped me realize that Women Who Code at the time was in very infancy stages. So they had not done a great job raising a lot of money themselves. But if I wanted to start my organization, he would be more than happy to file the requirements. So I should go and get the people. So I got an article written in the Huffington Post by Trent Smith of SaaS Institute, and then Lerato Imbele, a South African BBC reporter, also visited the women at a workshop and filmed it. And so I was getting traction, and so people were asking me, how can we help? And among them were 2 co-workers from Mathematica and 1 co-worker at Deloitte, because I'd moved from the think tank to consulting by then. And so 3 other people became the initial board members in October 2016, and the lawyer helped us file the entity in December 2016. And so that's a bit of the timeline. The mission for Coders Who Travel is to inspire and advance the careers of coders, that is computer and mathematical programmers in emerging markets like Ghana, and also in underserved communities right here in advanced countries like the US. And we've done signature coding boot camps for people like transitioning US military men and women into the workforce. Currently, we are doing a program with Deloitte professionals to help them pick up base SaaS skills and SaaS Via, which is the cloud version of SaaS. Through Women Who Code, we've transformed women to become coders and other career professionals that we have our sights on. The mission of Women Who Code is dedicated to women excelling in technology careers. So that's a bit of the timeline, the backstories, and the mission statements of both organizations.
Incredible. And you know what fascinates me is that there was a seemingly, let's say, unfortunate situation, and out of that difficulty, you still decided to, or you found, the edge to still pursue that passion. And out of, that whole scenario came Codesu Travel. And I think that's one distinct feature with entrepreneurs, people who, like, in spite of the adversity, in spite of uncomfortable situations, they would always find hope and would find opportunity, within that same scenario. That's, for me, stands out.
Yeah, you touch on a train, because for me, it was a disappointment, just like you said it, but it was also an encouragement because I saw the potential of the women, the meaningful time we had bonding with each other. And they weren't just women at the events. They were also what I've come to call the few good men. Not that there are few, but the few good women who happen to come around to support women to reach their highest potential. And so hearing the potential, the stories, it became very much like I could either abort the whole project because of my disappointment in not being paid, or I can continue like a pregnant woman who got pregnant under, unfavorable circumstances, but still decides to keep the baby. And so I chose to keep, the baby of Women Who Code-Accra, but to help support it more through a new organization, because at Women Who Code, I don't have fundraising duties, right? But at Coders Who Travel, I can have fundraising duties at any time that I want to. And so the lawyer helped me, guide me along those steps. But even him had the opinion that the project should be aborted and that I should begin anew, But looking back now, we have 3 more co-directors. We have technical leads and evangelists. Most of the women that I've met through Women Who Code-Accra, it's really been a gift to me as well, in as much as it began that way, there was good beyond that adversity.
I think also looking back, that whole scenario kind of explains why at the time there was just one of such organization, the subsidiary or a branch in Africa, because the business model, does not, let's say, support the kind of environment in Africa. And this is something I've observed myself, that a lot of the business models that are churned out, especially in the West, do not situate well in Africa. In a society, or let's say an environment where getting corporate sponsorship for such an activity or such a mission is near impossible. I myself got the license for TEDx events. So I've organized 2 TEDx events in Ghana. And in both, thank you. And in both events, I did not get any corporate sponsorship, right? So I had to think of ways and means to kind of come up with, ideas with my team to be able to still pull the 2 events off. So I think this also behoves on us, coming back to the first topic that we talked about, that we need to come up with business models. By we, I mean us Africans. We need to come up with business models that work within the context of our environment. Our environment believes in cooperatives, right? That's why farmers still have cooperatives. And when I was growing up, for example, we had like these guys, we used to call them like susu collectors, right? Now it's like microfinance, but at the very local level, and I remember I started saving through a susu man, like he had a kiosk, across the street, and it was built on trust. Society was built on trust. Like all the market women would go and save monies with him. We had a booklet, and like he wouldn't run away with your money. It was just built on trust, right? And we're able to do that. Many market women were able to save their monies to kind of send their kids to school. And these kinds of business models is what we need to explore more or exploit, beyond the theoretical classroom kind of models that the West tries to pontificate for us to just follow blindly. So yeah, it's a kind of a complex situation.
And I'll even add to that discourse that what made Women Who Code-Accra, and right now we are the longest African running network because it's not easy to run it, is that the power of what I've come to call the bridge builder. For them, I've become their bridge builder, right? Without me stepping in that gap financially and operationally with the lessons I've learned both in Ghana and corporate America about leadership and career and, you know, your resume and conducting yourself well and teaching the coding and whatnot, they wouldn't have that physical role model where they can shoot for, you know, because I remember one of them telling me at a past program was that, oh, Afia, so you came all the way for us. And she really felt you know, that I would have put aside everything I'm doing in the US to come and do something like that just for them, you know, and in a way that they might not connect if it's somebody, a foreigner or a foreign looking person in front of them. So there needs to be that partnership between the West and, you know, Africa, that if you want to do business, you need to find bridge builders who can close the gap between both, because, you know, the West, they are used to expecting their models to run successfully. And so if they are not getting results, I mean, why aren't we getting the results? And if it's failing, let's just shut it down. But, you know, Africans are like, you can't just shut it down. It's touching lives. You know, some people, this could even be their livelihood. How can I just shut it down? So it's like the soul and the mind need to come together across these boardrooms where these decisions and resources are allocated, that there is probably the Western way of doing things and there's the African way of doing things, but where can we meet in the middle ground so that the strengths of both sides can come to the negotiating table, you know? And the way I term it is the bridge builder framework.
Fantastic. Talking about passion, I know that there's an aspect of you that a lot of people either know or don't know, and that's the fact that you're also a musician. Like and I think, like, from where I sit, I personally think that you have like a genius mind, because like
thank you.
Yes, I mean, and I'm not like just flattering you, because I took time to think through before our session today. You know, the various things you do, they seem almost like divergent. However, you still seem to excel, you know, in all these things. Now, and that aspect of you that my viewers want to know is that you're also a musician. You have, like, is it 2 or 3 albums already out?
I have 2 albums.
2 albums out. Can you just share with us, right, like what it is like to be a musician, like to come up with like 2 albums and you're still coding and doing all that? Like, share a bit of that passion with us.
Yeah, so that has been the surprise of a lifetime, even for me. I am a Christian, and out of my relationship with God has flowed probably more than 24 original songs. In June 2018, while sitting in a leasing office of a townhome I was renting with my mom, I heard the phrase, "The anointing breaks the yoke." It came to my heart so resoundingly. I was watching 2 women discuss a subject, and I just heard that. Beyond that day, I started having the desire to just sing scriptures, sing this short song that was coming to heart. Because of the anointing, I've become a royal. And I was singing and didn't really think it would go anywhere beyond the 4 corners of my apartment. But as I sang and sang, I also began pressing into the meaning of the phrase, the anointing breaks the yoke. I mean, it was consuming me. What is the anointing that will break the yoke? And for me, I was going through a furnace or trial of mental health challenges at the time. And so I knew that the yoke must be maybe about that. And so I wanted to know more about God's anointing that takes care of a burden that we carry. And so one time I got paired with a missionary, a former missionary, this woman called Joan, and I was on my way to her house to do Bible studies. She would go through the Bible and teach me verse by verse in expository teaching. And it was raining cats and dogs. And I was even contemplating not going, but I just felt the desire to press through the rain and just go. And as I was going, it also came to my mind in a different way than the anointing breaks the yoke, that the person reveals the anointing. I was like, what is the person then? Because if it's the person that reveals the anointing, then I definitely want to know about the person. So I jumped on Google. I'm a coder. You have to pretty much web search things and Google the person. And it came up that crashing is the synonym. So I started Googling pressing and crashing, and I started seeing grapes and olives. And I looked into it, and both are pressed and crushed for oil and wine, respectively. And so I said, there is something that this furnace or trial of mental health is teaching me, and I want to know what. And then I remembered that although I love music and enjoy songs all my life, during my mental health struggle, I'd just been singing all manner of songs from that charismatic church, hymns from Methodist churches in Ghana, inspired by Wesley girls, contemporary American gospel music that I've been listening to from childhood, because I heard college students invest in them on that KNUST campus, all the way to current day contemporary music that I've been listening through radio stations. They all were flooding back to me. And as I was singing them, they will bring a lot of joy. I went on that journey for quite some time. I would say about 3.5 years, until that day when I heard the anointing breaks the yoke. And so in short, beyond that day, I had the desire to write new songs, and not just the desire, I was also basically having melodies drop into my heart freely from the Lord. Like when I'll go for a walk, or sometimes I'm using the restroom in the middle of the night, and I will immediately have to rush to my laptop or phone to record the melody so I don't forget. Now that I got the songs figured out, I needed someone to help me perform. You know, the pianist, the cellist, the harpist. Those were the instruments I wanted featured. And then I needed a co-producer. I'm the executive producer because it's original songs, but I needed a producer who understood musical sheets and musical notations to be able to communicate to the other instrumentalists and also help me perfect my voice. My voice is not the 100%, but hey, if you're singing and you're making a joyful noise unto the Lord, I think that is okay. That's all right.
Exactly.
I just want to share that with somebody. And so I'll be making a joyful noise unto the Lord. Some people love that, others don't, but hey, it's honoring the Lord, and the Lord has shown the proof in the fact that he's able to give original songs, even in our mess. I found my mess in my mental health struggle, but the Lord was gracious to bring these holy songs. And so they are featured on 2 albums for now. The Anointing Breaks the Yoke, and in the Chi version, in Osranu Bubu in Konya, it has 12 songs. The Anointing Breaks the Yoke, But God, The Light That Came is God, Habakkuk chapter 3, Revive Your Work in These Years, Luke chapter 15, There's Not a Friend Like You, Jesus, A Slave is Not Greater Than the Master, What Shall I Render Unto You, My Lord, The Season of Grace is Here, Jesus is Coming, the harvest song, Matthew chapter 13, when the harvest time comes, and then double portions. And they have similar names in Chi for the Chi album. And thank you for showing
Wow.
the channel. I've chronicled the journey. You will see the producers, you will see the sound engineer, you see some studio action. I just wanted to document the whole process to glorify the Lord, who was powerful enough to rescue me from utter darkness in my mental health challenges, to bring me into the light and revelation of his son, Jesus Christ.
This is incredible. I mean, I'm so moved and touched by, and that's why for me, I'm excited that we chose, passion for impacts, because this is what passion really is. If you're able to kind of pursue like a vision, irrespective of, what the world thinks, irrespective of even your own capabilities. Sometimes we want to feel that we are 100% capable before we do what God, tells us to do. But in your case, like you mentioned, right, it's not about having the best vocal dexterity, but just obeying what God has asked you to do. And that for me, that's it. That's what our life here is about. And thanks for sharing this gift with us and with the rest of the world. So for those of you watching, as you can see on the screen, this is Afia Owusu-Forfie. I'll go back to the main channel itself, and you can just go to youtube.com and just type in her name, Afia Owusu-Forfie, and you would see the whole channel, and you would also understand her journey in this aspect of her passion of sharing the music that God has placed in her heart to share with the rest of the world. Especially watching this one here, The Anointing That Breaks the Yoke. It gives you a true synopsis of her passion for this whole project, and you get to understand her in that light better. The other thing to also note is that she also has a YouTube channel for Coders Who Give, and I was curious to ask her earlier why Coders Who Give and not any other thing, and she says it's only those who give who create an impact, and that is so profound. If you have a gift, you have ability, and you don't share, you don't give it out to the rest of the world, then your impact is not known in the first place. So please go to YouTube and just also type in Coders Who Give, just to also understand, her work in this light. Like I said, Afia is able to combine like quite different capabilities and still excel in them, which is for me quite interesting. Afia, do you have anything that you would want to say to young women, especially? And for me, this is very important to me because there's this whole hubbub about large language models, artificial intelligence, and there's a key role that coders and programmers would play, or data analytics plays in this whole discussion. What would be your final words to a young woman who wants to get into coding, right? Are there any pathways or any words of advice or anything you could say to such a person watching us who would want to get into coding as a career?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. I think, it starts with you believing in yourself, because coding is going to, if you choose that career, it will challenge you to go beyond your own limits. And for me, whenever I'm required to go beyond the limits, I switch to faith and trust in God, right? Because, the psalmist says this perfectly. I look towards the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the maker of heaven and earth. So you will need the divine to really excel in coding. Although some people may say otherwise, I'm here to represent, what I know about my life, and it's been a lot of faith. We didn't get into that, but my start to programming wasn't too easy the first 2 years when I spent at the University of Ghana. But through a course advisor who started who first of all helped register me into the American Statistical Association. And my mother sent me money to pay the membership fees. I started seeing the potential of coding in those magazines. And later on in 2007, my mother sponsored me to attend my first ASA conference. All of that sounds a little bit expensive, but now we have meetups that are happening all over, even in Ghana, right? And so if you're interested in coding, believe in yourself. Find someone who can speak encouragement into your dream, and it doesn't have to be an immediate family member if they don't see eye to eye with your dream for wanting to code. But whatever it is, try and identify someone who can speak faith into that dream. And then I'll say leverage meetups and online communities to bond with people that are like-minded on that same journey. And then through that, hey, if you're a woman, reach out to us at Women Who Code/Accra. We will be here to also support you on that journey. And then don't give up, just don't give up. If you're a Christian, I just want to say, when God made the world and made Adam and said everything was good, he could just have walked away and it would have just been a world full of men. But he chose that he will create helpers in this ecosystem. And so our touch is definitely needed in all aspects of life, and also particularly in programming, because I believe women are endowed with a lot of nurturing abilities and incubation prowess to take something that is small and maximize it, and so it also makes prototypes and systems that are built humane, because women care about, not that men don't, but most women sometimes care more about the impact, not just the financial rewards on the next generation in every aspect, And so when more women are featured at the table of coding and programming, we're able to get the byproduct of nurturing and humane systems that are mindful of, maybe the environment and the next generation. And of course, there are exceptions to these rules immediately. I'm not saying no man can ever be nurturing. That's not what Afia is saying. All I'm saying is that more and more women, by and large, tend to be more nurturing and caring about the next generation.
That's so true. So thank you for sharing those words of wisdom with us. We are wrapping up. We're already over time, 10 minutes. But I'll just take, when you're having a good conversation, time just flies by. So I'll just take a few comments and questions that I have here. We'll just see. I think Dr. Evans Dia has tuned in. Thanks, Doc, for tuning in. He says, I'm watching live. Thank you.
Hi, Evans.
Yeah. And we also have Michael Edu Carol. He's also saying that they are watching live from Comerica.
Oh, shout out.
Comerica all the way. And then I also have engineer Chen Kusidapa, who is also said, I'm watching live. Thanks.
Hi,
I really appreciate it. Yeah. And we have a question from Dr. Evans Dia. He's also equally fascinated. He says, how does she do all that as a multi-potentialite, combining all those things and excelling? What has been some of her most testing or tough moments, and how did she overcome them? So the first aspect is, how are you able to combine all these various aspects of your life? And number two is there any testing or trial moment in your life, and how did you overcome that?
Yeah, I heavily depend on God, and I'm not just saying that as a cliche or a Christian woman, but there are times when I start things and I feel like what Jesus said, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Because at the start of any relevant assignment, there's a lot of pushing that you have to do in terms of giving your time, studying it, the effort, just that sheer intensity. And sometimes it can overwhelm you, but you have to come back at it and say, for the next day, yesterday is past, I did this, what can I do today? And so for me, there's this song that I used to sing in my childhood called One Day at a Time by Christy Lane. It's part of one of my mantras, whatever mountain I'm facing, I can chip away one day at a time. And so that helps. I hear a lot about multitasking because one will feel like, oh, I work in corporate America, I'm a musician, I'm doing entrepreneurship. How do I manage all of that? But the truth is, what I've learned is that focusing on one at a time. So if I block my time, 8:30 to 12, I'm working, I try to do that. If it's break time that I'm going to connect with an entrepreneur about something in my entrepreneurship endeavor, then that's what I'm doing. Because I realize that when I try to do it all in that same span of time, I get spread too thin, and then the quality and depth of each one sort of suffers. And so I now believe in something called singular tasking instead of multitasking at the same time. And then with every project, when you are working on it, you're able to enter this zone where it's like you're really accelerating, but then you have to switch, because life is happening or something like that. And I learned this a lot in programming because that sometimes happens, like you are near the solution that you are solving, and it's like you have to finish work and go home or go do something. So I write the notes on how exactly I'm feeling, what I'm observing, take all the notes before you switch. And so that when you come to it again, you are aware of how you were feeling, the thoughts, the advantages, what you were accelerating, so that you get back into the zone quicker, So it doesn't become like I left it sitting, and so now I forget where I was even at to begin with. So that's how I work with the first part of Evans's question. But the most testing has been with, going through that furnace of mental health, because as somebody who's been told I'm smart all my life, to wrestle with that was tough because it feels like you were losing the one thing that has defined you all of your life. But somebody has said that when you find yourself at rock bottom, that's when you find that God is also there, because one time I was in the ICU and I woke up singing, intensive care unit, and I woke up singing, and it marked my life in 2016 because I accepted and interpreted it as God was just giving me a second lease of life. And He definitely wanted me to live it dedicated to Him. And so going through that tough battle with mental health trials was definitely definitive, but it's also been a source of great faith in my life, because now I believe in God in a tangible way, not because I've seen Him as red, blue, or black or yellow, but because of His nearness, that the God of Zephaniah 3:17, that the Lord in thy midst is mighty, and He will rejoice over you, was singing. I have experienced the power of songs and biblical-based songs, and in this ability to access healing for one's mental fortitude. And so it's been one of the testing. I mean, earlier on in life, I went through that patch academically at the University of Ghana where I didn't even know whether to stick with statistics, but nothing compares to, going through a mental health battle. And I'm grateful to the Lord that He's allowed me to see His goodness. There's this song, Doing So Well, the goodness of God. Everybody likes it, that His goodness is chasing us, He's chasing after me.
It's incredible. And thanks, Dr. Evangelia, for sending this question through. I truly can relate with everything you've shared, and thank you for sharing, Afia, this part of your life with us. I think that a lot of times when we go through some of these trials and trying moments, there's the natural tendency to just be in your shell and keep it all to yourself. So thanks for sharing your vulnerability with us and your life story, and sharing those nuggets of wisdom as far as, what you have been able to achieve and your passion as well. I'm very grateful. Are there any final words before we leave the stream?
Yes. So when we go to use the restroom, and I'm borrowing it from someone who once said this, we don't know the next person who will come and use it after us, but we still clean it and leave a good place.
Yeah.
So that's how you make impact. I think is the best analogy to what we've discussed. Impact is, leaving this world a better place for somebody else, because even if you don't know them, because you've been graced with certain talents and abilities to make that happen. And so that would be my final message. And thank you again for having me on People Who Inspire. And it's been a privilege being here.
Thank you so much, Afia. I'm really, really grateful. I know what it means, to kind of take time off your weekend to inspire other people. And I want to thank all of you, all those who tuned in, for those of you who sent your questions, those of you who sent in your contributions. Oh, there's one final one from Harry. Let's see. So Harry is also a very good friend. He's been on the show before. He says, caught only the last 10 minutes and I love it. Leave the world a better place for the next. Yes. So that's exactly what Afia has said. Yeah. Thanks, Harry, for tuning in. So for all of you who tuned in, I would like to say a very big thank you. I know today we're all excited. We've gone beyond the time, but I think it was worth it. And I would definitely catch you again in the next episode of People Who Inspire. Thank you all. And thank you, Afia. I would say bye-bye for now.
You're welcome. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye, Prince.
Bye.